There's no doubt that the Shedeur Sanders slide through 3 full NFL rounds seems to be the craziest draft story we've seen in a long time. But I actually think there's a lot of logic to it, and the crazy conspiracy theories or embedded secondary meanings are unnecessary. So let me get to all of that. A little reminder, though, remember to subscribe to the channel, either right now or by the time we're done with this video. That way you'll get other DA deep dives like this one as I break down the NFL draft, the NFL offseason, the NFL storylines going into the season, or next year when we finally get into NFL regular season action. Keep it locked right here. So let's just start with the first round stuff, because he was projected by many mock drafts to be a top 2 pick in the NFL draft dating back to October. I think that was completely misleading, and I think that ended up creating unfair, unrealistic expectations of where Shedeur would go. As we got closer to the NFL draft, as we made our way into April, you started seeing more mock drafts potentially put him later in the first round. And then you had guys who said they liked Shedeur and favorably would comp him to kind of journeyman, okay, middle-of-the-road quarterbacks. You know, when Dan Orlovsky compared him to Andy Dalton, he was not doing it as a slight. He was doing it as a favorable comp. But you would never draft Andy Dalton with the 2nd overall pick or the 5th overall pick of an NFL draft. And I think what ended up happening was the people that put out mocks during the regular season, really it was just an exercise in entertainment. And that whole industry has become kind of ridiculous, where we have mock drafts the day after the current draft is over. And ultimately, it was an ill-informed group of mock drafts, I think, through much of the regular season. Once we got into draft season, the film started to speak for itself. And there were a lot of flaws in Shedeur Sanders' game. This happened to be a remarkably thin quarterback season, a remarkably thin quarterback draft. And so in some years where there's 5 potential NFL quarterbacks in the first round, perhaps we would have seen Shedeur projected early 2nd. Maybe if there were a group of draftable first-round QBs like last season, we would have seen the early mock drafts have Shedeur at 25, 32, 38, to then kind of calibrate realistic expectations of where he was. But because he was either the 1st or 2nd best quarterback in this draft, he had to go way up high. It was tough, I think, for GMs to look at his film and square with the fact that he's not a great mobile quarterback, so he's not going to create things with his legs like a Josh Allen, like a Lamar Jackson. He doesn't have a huge, big arm, and he took a lot of sacks. On top of it, there wasn't elite competition that he played elite against. It was 2 seasons of a rebuilding program that didn't have these kind of massive college football playoff caliber matchups where you could say, wow, look what he did there. I think all of that really hurt his film and hurt his tape in the evaluators' minds. And so they looked at him and said, he doesn't get a first-round grade. But in our mind, the public's mind, it was, well, Shedeur is famous. He's got to be great. And that's where the problems began to happen. Once we got out of the first round, you could say, well, there's not an NFL GM that looks at him as a potential franchise quarterback yet. Once we got through the 2nd and 3rd rounds, and other guys like Tyler Shuck or Dylan Gabriel get picked ahead of him, now we can start asking questions. Well, why do those guys end up getting picked as project quarterbacks? There's no way you could look at Dylan Gabriel and think that he's going to start and compete for QB1 when he hits training camp. So what's the difference? And the difference there is what I think people are wondering about. And that's where this whole thing gets kind of confusing. The difference there, to me, is the concern about the celebrity of your QB2, QB3, or project quarterback. You know, one thing that I've heard from talent evaluators in the league, not mock draft analysts, is that he's got such fame that it becomes a headache if he's not playing. Now, you can consider that fair or unfair, but here's where I would say it's very logical. These NFL teams are wildly petrified of distractions. They do not want the distractions, as though there's some ghost and boogeyman around every single corner. The leaks, the distractions, off the field distractions, on the field distractions. It becomes a catch-all for anything that is not aligned with the message in the building. And the NFL obviously has so much media attention on it that they are peering around every corner wondering, where's it going to come from today? Is it going to come from my local media? Is it going to come from the national media? Is it going to come from the social media? Other leagues don't have to worry about the intense scrutiny on their teams, on their players and coaches as much as the NFL does. The NFL has this incredible glare on it because everybody around the country seems to have a take on every team in the league. The difference between the Tyler Shucks, the Dylan Gabriels, the other project QBs that would get drafted ahead of Shedeur Sanders is they don't have fame and celebrity, and they don't have a platform like Deion has with their dads. That is terrifying, I think, for a lot of these GMs and coaches. I think it's terrifying. Because let's face it, there are plenty of NFL GMs that'll take a risk, take a shot on a guy's character or potential distractions if they are convinced he's going to make our team better. They'll take a lot of chances with a lot of questionable character guys as long as that guy's going to help them win. There's always one GM. Well, Shedeur didn't have any character questions in terms of off-the-field problems, criminal baggage, poor decision-making. Perhaps he didn't interview well. Perhaps he comes off as entitled, but he wouldn't be the first one to not interview well or come off as entitled. It's the celebrity. That's the difference. It's the celebrity of Deion and the celebrity of Shedeur. Because if you draft Shedeur Sanders to be your QB3 as a developmental guy, the Giants took Jackson Dart and he may be QB3 the entire season. Well, you have to now deal with a media, a public, a fan base that's constantly wondering, well, what's happening with our third quarterback? Why isn't he in? Why did he not get elevated? He's already a story because he's Shedeur Sanders. And perhaps that social media fame, that ability to rally the troops at the click of a few buttons on your iPhone that he has because of that incredible social media following and that celebrity also worries them that if he does not get playing time, he feels like he's not getting a fair shot at the competition, that he could fire off a tweet to millions of followers, and it is massive, massive news. The second part is, I think there's a fear of Deion's platform. I think there's GMs and owners, head coaches as well, that heard loud and clear when Deion Sanders last season said that he would try to steer Shedeur to the right situation, that Shedeur is not going to play anywhere, that he didn't want Shedeur playing in cold weather climates. Now, note that Deion backed off of those bold proclamations, but I think that's because he started to realize, Shedeur's market is drying up. Well, I think there's a fear that if Shedeur is QB2 and QB1 has a few bad games, that Deion Sanders goes on College game day before a Colorado football game and says something like, it's time for Shedeur to play. It's time for my son to play. Deion has remarkably famous friends. I mean, the president is tweeting about Deion and Shedeur. There are a lot of celebrities or power brokers around sports and entertainment and obviously politics that Deion's become very friendly with. I think there's a worry that if Shedeur doesn't play, then Deion gets involved and then the whole thing blows up in your face. And those are risks you wouldn't take for a guy to be your QB2, QB3, or project developmental quarterback. So the whole thing has kind of been, I think, a little sideways from the start. Because of Shedeur's fame, we as a public misjudged his ability. He was more famous than he was good. And once we got into the NFL draft, he wasn't good enough to be drafted where we thought he would be. And then afterwards, instead of a team taking a flyer, they got scared because they worry about the fallout of distractions for a guy that's a depth guy on their roster. I don't think there's much more than that. It's impossible to get into the mind of 32 different GMs, but I don't think there's any grand conspiracy theory. I don't think there's a symbol of what the NFL doesn't want from their college football players. I think this is kind of a singular moment in time because there just hasn't been another middle of the NFL draft QB whose dad was as famous as Deion Sanders, and there's rarely a player as famous as Shedeur who gets a third-round grade, let's say, from a lot of NFL evaluators. Just as a postscript in all of this. And there's a lot of middle-round quarterbacks that ended up playing very well, earning starting jobs, and having really good careers. Russell Wilson was a third-rounder. Dak was a fourth-rounder. Mark Brunell was a fifth-rounder. Rich Gannon, Joe Theismann, all these guys played for Super Bowls, in Super Bowls, won MVPs, played in big playoff games, championship games. There is no reason that Shedeur can't be drafted in the middle of this draft and not go on to have a really good career if he's worthy of it. This does not end his NFL career because he did not get drafted in the first 3 rounds. Hopefully that clarifies things for you. We appreciate you watching. I appreciate you watching. Remember to subscribe to the channel. Click on this button right next to me, and you'll get more notifications when we do DA deep dives like this one and do the live show on Sunday nights. And as always, you can listen to me weekday mornings on SiriusXM, Mad Dog Sports Radio, Channel 82. We'll see you next time, everybody.